Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Florent. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. We're excited to share about the Canadian electric vehicle fast charging infrastructure. And today we are giving with all of you some insights around the Q1 2026 numbers. I'm Florent, the co-founder and CEO of Paren.
And I'm Bill Ferro. I'm the co-founder and chief data officer.
All right, we have a lot to cover, Bill, so let's get into it. And before we jump into some of the data, we Paren are a data platform covering the US and Canada, connecting to more than 95% of the fast charging ports on each of these countries. And that allows us to have real time and historical data. And we are thrilled to share some of the insights with everyone in the industry. Let's talk about first ports deployment and how many ports have we seen coming to the market in Q1 2026 in Canada.
And what's really interesting here is when we compare that number in Q1 with the number from Q4. In the US, we see a big dip between Q4 and Q1. In Canada, we're not seeing that, right? We're actually seeing slightly more ports. And including, I think Mercedes-Benz deployed their first charging stations in Q1
That's right.
in British Columbia. So we're seeing new entrants. The Canadian government released some additional incentives and rulings that will hopefully help the industry, both charging and the EV vehicle industry in Canada. And so we're excited to see more ports being deployed, more entrants in the charging space.
Yeah, I think that's really fantastic. I mean, to see that 50% more in Q1 2026 compared to Q1 2025, in terms of number of ports. So that is definitely remarkable and different from what we are seeing in the US. Obviously, different scale, but a different trend on ports deployed. When we take a look at the ports per station, I mean, that looks very similar, right, to what we are seeing in the US.
It does look similar to the US. And again, calling out that we're seeing the same pattern from 2.8 average ports per station in Q1 2025 to almost 4 in 2026. So more bigger sites is just the new norm everywhere in North America. And it makes sense, right? If you're going to spend all that money digging the trenches and getting electricity to the site, let's get it to where it can be future-proof, at least, for the next 5 to 10 years. And so seeing more ports deployed per station is a great sign for the industry.
And also like the downtrend, on Tesla number of ports per station. So we've seen similar trend in the US, and 12 ports per station seems to be the average new normal maybe for Tesla, both in the US and Canada.
Yep, and I think the average is 12 because every new site installed was 12. So the mean, and max are all the same.
All right.
So that's the new normal. At least for now, we'll keep track of it, and if it changes, we will let you know.
Well, let's take a look now at demand. We've seen ports being deployed, more ports in Q1 than in Q4. Taking a look at demand. So we are now looking at a trend that is very familiar to us in the US post Q4. You want to walk us through that, Bill?
Yeah, so we look at January, February, March of this year, and we'll compare it to Q4, which is, again, traditionally the busiest time of year. Look at December, would be the maximum amount of charging sessions that we saw in any month in 2025. And then when you look at 2026, February is a common theme. The doldrums of winter, no one's going out and charging unless they absolutely have to. And so we see that reduction there. Good to see that March is on the upswing again. Again, the March numbers being higher than September, October of last year tells us that the infrastructure is being used, and that we're seeing more EVs out in the wild using the public infrastructure.
Right. And also we're studying, the tracking and the reporting from July. We had some data coverage, before July of 2025, but we really felt that the coverage was strong enough starting from July. So, bear with us for a full year review as we progress into the year. When we take a look at an overlap, supply and demand here, what are we seeing? Are we ahead of demand, or are we just like right on par?
It looks to me like we are ahead of demand. That supply, the reason we see the dip in January, and the number in March is a little bit below what last year's average was, is because the infrastructure is out ahead of the curve, which is where you want to be at the beginning of the year, right? You can even see here July and August of last year, infrastructure is really not it. It's matching demand, but it's not exceeding demand. Whereas this year, now with an increase in demand, we're seeing infrastructure is still ahead. So that's all. These are all good signs for the industry, and especially in Canada, where we expect to see more EVs in operation
Absolutely.
as the year progresses.
Absolutely. And also, like in the report, we go deeper into some of the micro trends at the province level, but also at the CMA level. And we see that some metro areas are definitely dealing with a different dynamic where demand is much stronger right now. So that's a national average. We believe that it's good sharing these trends, they do capture where the market is going overall. Let's take a look at utilization rate, which is another way of measuring the balance in between supply and demand. And utilization rate is 11.3%. How is that?
Again, comparable with what we would expect to see with a typical summer. I'm sorry, typical Q4 to Q1 drop. And so again, it shows us that infrastructure is still slightly ahead of demand. And again, it tells the same story as the last slide.
And also, when we compare that to the US, so in the US, we were at 15.6% utilization rate on Q1. So it's interesting that Canada I mean, the infrastructure is not as heavily tapped than the one that we have in the US. So there are still rooms for demand to potentially catch up with the supply in Canada. But once again, that's a very micro market, that we are seeing in some very micro trends. So,
And we're seeing trends at the local level, like British Columbia, parts of the Vancouver area are just as busy as what you might see in San Francisco and California.
absolutely.
And similarly, Toronto and Montreal have busy times and areas similar to what you might see in northeastern cities. So there is a big swath of space in Canada that doesn't have a lot of charging, doesn't have a lot of utilization. That kind of brings this overall number down. But you need the infrastructure there in order to take the Great Canadian Road Trip.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about that. And then that's actually another way of looking at utilization, right? When you take a look at the provinces, you can see the coastal provinces from, the British Columbia, Quebec, Ontario, where demand is pretty high.
Right. And that backs up what we were just saying, that
Yeah.
the big cities are where the infrastructure the build out is happening, and most of the vehicles are in place.
Talking about pricing, that looks stable, right? 48 cents, 48 cents.
Very, very stable. Again, we did change our pricing algorithm a bit this year so that we have a consistent view, not only of pricing in Q1, but also we reworked the numbers in the past. But we're seeing the same trends across North America. The prices have stabilized and remained very steady, even as we watch gas prices fluctuate wildly.
Pricing for provinces also driven by some utility players. So it's a very regional market here.
Yeah, very regional. And again, even those 70 cents and 67 cents out in Western Canada, there are smaller numbers of stations there, right? So it is having an impact on the number, but not as big as one might think. It's the three larger provinces that have the larger cities where most of the usage and stations are concentrated. So they're going to drive the average price. Again, our data continues to go down even to the CMA level, as you mentioned before.
Right. And so when it comes to reliability, so we've seen some reliability score pretty high, in the 93 score in the US. It is slightly down in Canada and also like slightly down from Q4.
Still relatively high, right? We
Okay.
like to see, we think of these as grades. Anything above 90 is an A. So we're still in the A category. Um, Down during the winter time, during the time when sometimes seasonal maintenance, it's the best time to perform seasonal maintenance. Then versus doing it in the middle of the summer. Weather does have an impact. We know the weather is more severe in
Mhm.
Canada in some places than it is in the US. So we expect that fluctuation. I fully expect that this will rise back up in Q2, and we're already seeing that.
So another way of looking at all of these metrics, talking about reliability, pricing, utilization, is for us to build quadrants. And we came out with these four quadrants. The top left one are the pre-demand build-out provinces. So that means they have very high reliability, but utilization is lower than the national average. So we're talking about Alberta, for instance, New Brunswick is sort of like at the border as well. But that's, the pre-demand build out. The size of the circle is reflecting the pricing as well. And you can see that these provinces have a price which is on the higher end of what we are seeing for the rest of Canada.
And we
On
see British Columbia, for example, right, is in the stressed zone. And a lot of that, again, heavy utilization there, as we talked about. There is some new build out going on there that we think is going to have some impact. And we fully expect that the build out will continue there because that is one of the key areas where we see an increase in vehicles in operation.
Yes. Give us some feedback if you think that, this view is also interesting to you. When we look back at Q1 2026, the key takeaways is that we are seeing the network expanding to over 9,000 ports. It's an increase from Q4 to Q1, which is quite remarkable in Canada, something we haven't seen in the US. Shifting to larger sites, which is something we are seeing in the US as well, but it's great news for drivers having more options when they come to a charging station. Utilization remained fairly steady at around 11%, and it's a good sign. We're seeing that demand is keeping pace with the growth of the infrastructure, so that's a very healthy place to be. And pricing and reliability remain stable. Reliability being pretty high, and pricing remaining fairly low. So these are the takeaways. Anything, Bill, that you would want to add, or should we direct people to check out the full report?
Yeah, the full report gives folks a lot more detail. But again, I do think the introduction of some new players in the space, and we know there are others that are looking at entering the space, and so it's going to be a very interesting year as we see, I think, some changes in the infrastructure coming within Canada.
We're excited about what's ahead in Canada as well as in the US. We'll keep reporting on that. Thank you so much, Bill. It was great chatting with you.
Same here, and don't forget, click the or take a snapshot of the QR code here to download the report. And again, send us feedback. Hello@paren.app. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Thank you, Bill. Bye.
Thank you.